Welcome to Nachtmeier Witness. Some nights feel wrong before anything happens. The air feels heavy, the room feels colder, and somewhere in the dark, you get the strange feeling that you are being watched. Tonight, you will hear stories from people who became witnesses to things they never expected to see. Some saw someone standing in the shadows. Some heard voices with no one nearby. Others found themselves in places that did not feel real at all. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from tonight. And if you enjoy true scary stories with a slow, dark atmosphere, subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness. Get comfortable. The night has already begun. One of my favorite things to do at the end of the day was to sit on the back porch and smoke a cigarette before settling in for the night. It was a small ritual, nothing special to anyone else, but it meant something to me. The house would be quiet, the day would be finished, and I could sit there for a few minutes with no real responsibility except to breathe, think, and let the night settle around me. Some people have coffee in the morning. Some people read before bed. For me, back then, it was that last cigarette on the porch. It was my way of telling myself the day was over. The back of my house faced a stretch of open darkness, but a few hundred feet away, there was a road with a street light. That light was one of the main things you noticed at night. It was far enough away that it did not fully light up the yard, but close enough that it created this pale wash over the road and the ground around it. Everything beyond that light was dark, and everything inside it looked strangely exposed. At night, especially late at night, that light almost felt like a stage. Anything that walked into it became the center of attention, even if it was just a stray cat, a raccoon, or a deer passing through. I had seen deer around before. That was not unusual. They would come out near the road sometimes, especially when things were quiet. They would move through the edges of the property, lower their heads, nibble at things, pause, listen, and then continue on. Deer can be beautiful, but they can also be strange animals when you watch them in low light. Their movements are delicate and nervous at the same time. One second, they look peaceful, and the next they freeze like they have heard something you cannot hear. Their eyes catch light in a way that makes them look almost unreal. Still, I was used to them. A deer near the road was not enough to scare me. That night was foggy. Not thick, blinding fog, not the kind where the world disappears completely, but enough to soften everything. The road looked slightly blurred. The streetlight had a glow around it, a hazy circle that made the air look visible. The trees and the edges of the yard seemed farther away than usual, even though they were in the same places they always were. Fog changes familiar spaces. It takes a yard you know and makes it feel like it belongs to somewhere else. Sounds seem quieter, shapes seem less certain, and distance becomes harder to judge. It was not bad enough that I could not see anything, but it was enough to make the night feel off. I was sitting on the back porch, unwinding the way I always did, when a deer walked into the light near the road. It came out of the darkness and stepped into the pale glow beneath the streetlight, and at first there was nothing unusual about it. It looked like a normal deer doing normal deer things. It lowered its head, moved around slowly, and seemed to be nosing at the ground. It was calm, or at least it looked calm from where I was sitting. I watched it the way you watch wildlife when you are alone at night, not because anything exciting is happening, but because it is something living and moving in the quiet. There was something peaceful about it at first. The fog, the light, the deer, the cigarette smoke drifting up in front of me, it all had that still late-night feeling where even ordinary things seem important. I did not move much. I just sat there and watched it. The deer kept wandering around in the glow, taking little steps, lowering its head, lifting it again, listening, and going back to whatever it was doing. I had been watching it for a little while, long enough that my brain had accepted it as part of the scene. There was nothing to worry about, just a deer by the road, just the streetlight, just fog, just another quiet night. Then it stood up, not rearing up for a second, the way animals sometimes do when startled. Not jumping or kicking or fighting with another deer, it stood straight up on its hind legs. Smoothly, deliberately, like that was a normal way for it to move. At first, my brain did not understand what I was seeing. There was a delay, just a second or two, where the image entered my eyes, but did not make sense. Deer are not supposed to stand like that. They can rear up, sure, they can rise on their back legs briefly if they are fighting or reaching, but this was not that. This deer straightened up and balanced there in the foggy light like a person might. Its front legs hung in front of it in that wrong, useless-looking way, and its body stretched tall under the streetlight. Then it took a few steps. That was the part that turned confusion into fear. If it had only stood up and dropped back down, I might have been able to laugh it off later. I might have told myself it was stretching, or startled, or doing some weird animal thing I did not know about. But it did not drop back down. It took a few casual steps toward the light pole while still standing upright on its hind legs. Not frantic, not stumbling wildly. Casual, that word is what makes the memory so wrong. It moved like it was used to doing it. I choked on my own smoke. The cigarette was still in my hand, but for a second, I forgot how to breathe. The smoke hit wrong in my throat, and I coughed hard, loud enough to break the quiet. The sound felt enormous in the fog. It was not a scream, but it was enough. The deer heard me. It turned its head toward me. That was when I felt something cold move through my body. There is a huge difference between seeing something strange and having that strange thing notice you. Until that moment, I had been watching it like I was safe, like I was hidden in the dark of my porch, and the deer was just an odd thing happening far away under the streetlight. But when it turned its head toward me, that comfort vanished. It knew I was there, or at least it reacted to me. From that distance, in the fog and the glow, I could not make out every detail of its face, but the movement was clear. Its head turned in my direction while it was still upright, still balanced on those hind legs, and for one horrible second, it felt less like an animal had heard me, and more like something wearing an animal's shape had been caught doing something it did not want me to see. I froze. My body wanted to move, but my mind was stuck on the impossible shape of it. The deer, or whatever it was, had no business standing like that. It had no business walking like that. It had no business turning toward me like a person caught in the act. The fog around the light made it even worse because it blurred the edges of the body just enough that my imagination filled in the wrong parts. Long legs, tall body, head turned, the road behind it, the light above it, the smoke still burning in my hand. Then it bolted. But it did not drop down to all fours. It ran for the road still on two legs. That is the image that never left me. Not the deer standing, not even the head turning. It was the way it fled. The movement was fast and wrong, like a person trying to run in the body of a deer, or a deer suddenly remembering how to imitate a person badly. It should have fallen. It should have gone back down. It should have moved the way deer move, with that quick four-legged spring into the dark. Instead, it stayed upright and took off toward the road, disappearing out of the wash of the streetlight and into the fog. I sat there for a few seconds after it vanished, still choking a little, still holding the cigarette, still trying to understand what I had just seen. The night went quiet again almost immediately, which somehow made it worse. There was no dramatic sound afterward. No crashing through trees, no strange call, No second creature appearing in the light. Just the fog, the road, the street light, and the empty space where the deer had been. The world acted like nothing had happened. But something had happened. I tried to explain it to myself right away. That is what people do when they see something that does not fit. Your brain grabs for ordinary explanations because the alternative is too uncomfortable. Maybe it was injured. Maybe it had gotten tangled in something. Maybe the fog distorted the way it looked. Maybe there was a slope in the ground that made it seem upright. Maybe I was tired. Maybe the smoke got in my eyes. Maybe it had only reared up and I misunderstood the movement. But none of those explanations matched what I saw. I had watched it stand. I had watched it take steps. I had watched it turn toward me. I had watched it run away on two legs. The casualness of those first steps is what ruined every normal explanation. An injured animal does not usually stand upright and walk calmly toward a light pole. A startled deer does not casually stroll on its hind legs in the fog. A trick of light does not turn its head when you cough. And the distance was not so far that I could simply say I saw a shadow wrong. I knew what I saw. I just did not know what it meant. There is something uniquely terrifying about an animal doing something almost human. If a person stands under a streetlight, that is normal. If a deer stands under a streetlight, that is normal. But if a deer stands like a person, walks like a person, and then notices you noticing it, the whole scene becomes wrong in a way that is hard to explain. It is not just fear of an animal. It is fear of the boundary between things breaking down. Animals are supposed to move like animals. People are supposed to move like people. When something crosses that line, even for a few seconds, your body reacts before your mind can make sense of it. I do not know how long I stayed on the porch after that, but I know I did not relax again. The cigarette was no longer comforting. The night was no longer peaceful. Every dark area beyond the porch seemed too dark. The fog no longer looked soft and calm. It looked like cover. The streetlight, which had always made the road feel safer, suddenly felt like the place where something had revealed itself by accident. I kept staring toward it, half expecting the deer to come back into the light, maybe on all fours this time. Pretending to be normal, it did not come back. Eventually, I went inside. I probably locked the door faster than I needed to. I probably stood there for a moment after closing it, listening, trying to hear if anything was moving outside. The house felt safer than the porch, but not completely safe. That is the thing about seeing something strange close to home. It follows you inside. You can close the door, but you still know the thing was out there, only a few 100 feet away, under the same light you have looked at 100 times before. The view from your house changes after that. The porch is not just a porch anymore. The yard is not just a yard. The road is not just a road. It becomes the place where you saw something you were not supposed to see. After that night, I stopped smoking on the back porch. I smoke on the front porch now. That may sound like a small thing, but it was not. The back porch had been my routine, my quiet place, my end-of-the-day ritual. I gave it up because one night a deer walked into the streetlight, stood up on its hind legs, took casual steps like it was used to being upright, turned its head when it heard me choke on smoke, and then ran away toward the road still on two legs. I did not need to see it again. I did not need to test whether it had been a one-time thing. I did not need to sit out there night after night waiting for the fog to come back and the light to reveal something else. Sometimes I still think about it when I see deer near roads at night. Most of them are normal, of course. They step out, freeze in headlights, lower their heads, flick their ears, and vanish into the trees the way deer are supposed to. But part of me always watches a little longer now. Part of me waits to see if one will rise. Part of me remembers that foggy night and the streetlight behind my house, and the way my stomach dropped when that deer turned toward me from across the darkness. I do not know what it was. Maybe there is some ordinary animal behavior that explains it, though I have never seen anything like it before or since. Maybe it was a deer doing something rare and strange, and the fog made it feel more unnatural than it was. Maybe my mind filled in something impossible because of the light and distance. Those are the explanations I can say out loud when I want to be reasonable. But when I am honest with myself, I know why I stopped going out back at night. It was not because I saw a deer act a little weird. It was because, for a few seconds, I saw something that looked like it forgot how a deer was supposed to behave. And when it realized I was watching, it turned toward me and ran away upright into the fog. That was enough for me. When I was 11 years old, something happened in my bedroom that I still cannot explain, even after all these years. It was not one of those huge, dramatic paranormal experiences where doors slammed, voices spoke, or a shadow figure stood at the end of the bed. It was much smaller than that. But in a way, that is what made it so disturbing. It was simple. It was quiet. It happened in the middle of an ordinary day, right after school, in a room I knew better than any other place in the house. And because it was so simple, there was no real way to twist it into something normal without ignoring the details. I had just gotten home from school. I was 11, so it was that age where your bedroom feels like your whole little world. Everything in it has its own place, even if it looks messy to other people. You know where your things are. You know which objects have been sitting in the same spot for years. You know the shape of your furniture, the height of your shelves, the way the light comes in, and the places where things usually fall, if they are going to fall. It was not a strange room to me. It was my room. That is one reason this memory has always stuck with me. If it had happened somewhere unfamiliar, I might have blamed it on not knowing the space. But this happened in a room where I knew what belonged where. In my room I had these cabinets, and on top of them were a few toys. They were not toys I played with every day anymore. They were more like old room decorations, things that had been placed up high and then slowly became part of the background. One of them was a teddy bear. It had been sitting in the same spot for about 5 or 6 years. That is not an exaggeration. It was one of those things that had stayed there so long that I barely thought about it anymore. It was just there, always in the same place, high up on the cabinets, out of reach unless someone actually meant to move it. The teddy bear was not sitting near the edge. That is important. The cabinet was fairly deep, and the bear was all the way toward the back. It was not balanced dangerously. It was not halfway hanging off. It was not leaning over the side like it might fall if someone breathed too hard. It had been there for years without slipping, shifting, or tumbling down. The only time it had been moved recently was about a month earlier when we did a deep clean and dusted the room. Because the top of the cabinets was pretty high, those toys did not get touched often. During that cleaning, the bear had been picked up, the area dusted, and then it had been placed back. After that, it stayed there again like always. For a whole month, nothing happened. That day after school, nothing felt strange at first. I came into my room and started changing clothes. It was the kind of normal routine you do without thinking. School clothes off, home clothes on, maybe thinking about homework, food, TV, or whatever else mattered to an 11-year-old after getting home. I had my back turned to the cabinets while I was changing. I was not looking at the toys. I was not paying attention to the teddy bear. There was no storm outside, no shaking, no loud noise, no one running through the room, no pet jumping around. Nothing that should have made anything move. Then I heard something fall. It was sudden enough that I turned around right away. It was not a tiny sound like something lightly shifting. It was the clear sound of an object hitting the floor. When I turned, I saw the teddy bear on the floor. But it was not just below the cabinet. It was not on the bed, where it should have landed if it had somehow slid or fallen off normally. It was almost on the other side of the room. That is the part that made my brain stop for a second. At first, I was just confused. I looked at the bear, then at the cabinets, then at the space between them. It took a moment for me to understand what was wrong with what I was seeing. A teddy bear falling from the top of a cabinet would follow a pretty simple path. Even at 11, I knew that. The bed was near the cabinets. If the bear had slipped forward and fallen, it should have landed on the bed, or maybe very close to it. If it had rolled off in some strange way, it still should not have flown across the room. It did not make sense for it to be where it was. The distance was wrong. The angle was wrong. The whole scene looked less like the bear had fallen and more like someone had picked it up and thrown it. That is what scared me. If something simply falls, you can usually see how it happened. A book falls from a shelf and lands below the shelf. A toy slides off a table and lands beside the table. Maybe it bounces a little, maybe it hits something and changes direction, but there is still some logic to it. This did not have that logic. The teddy bear had been at the back of a deep cabinet, high up, where it had been stable for years. Somehow, without anyone touching it, it had gone from that spot to the floor almost across the room. Not on the bed, not under the cabinet, across the room. I remember standing there and trying to make it make sense. My mind immediately wanted a normal explanation, because that is what your mind does when something impossible happens in a familiar place. Maybe it fell, but if it fell, why did it not land on the bed? Maybe it bounced. But it was a teddy bear, not a ball. Soft toys do not bounce across a room like that. Maybe it had been near the edge. But it had not been near the edge. It had always been toward the back, and even after the deep clean a month earlier, it had been placed back there. Maybe it had slowly shifted over time. But why would it suddenly shift after a month of sitting still? And even if it had, how would it gain enough force to land where it did? The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. The cabinet itself made the situation even stranger. Because it was deep, the teddy bear would have had to move forward quite a bit before it could even fall off. It was not like it was sitting on a thin shelf with no room. It was at the back. If gravity had pulled it down, it would first have needed some reason to travel from the back to the front. That would already be odd. But then, once it reached the edge, it would have had to fall outward in a way that carried it past the bed and onto the floor far away from where it should have landed. That is not how a soft toy falls. There was no force pushing it. There was no one else in the room. I had my back turned. I heard the sound, turned around, and there it was. The thought that someone had thrown it was the only explanation that matched where it landed. But that was impossible too. No one was there. I was alone in the room. The door, the layout, the timing, everything made it clear that no person had walked in, grabbed the bear, and thrown it without me noticing. There was no time for that. There was no sound of footsteps, no movement, no one rushing out, and yet the bear's position on the floor looked exactly like it had been thrown by an invisible hand. That kind of small, impossible moment can be more frightening than something loud and obvious. If a door slams, maybe it was wind. If a light flickers, maybe it was electricity. If you hear a noise at night, maybe the house is settling. But when a specific object that has been sitting in one place for years suddenly ends up somewhere it should not be able to reach, your mind has fewer places to hide. You are left staring at the object, the original spot, and the distance between them, trying to force the world back into order. I was young, but I was not so young that I could not understand basic cause and effect. The teddy bear did not belong on that part of the floor. It could not have landed there by falling naturally. It had not moved in years except during cleaning. It had been placed back a month earlier and had stayed put. There was no shaking, no animal, no person. No open window gust strong enough to move a stuffed animal from the back of a cabinet and throw it across the room. It was just suddenly there. I remember feeling that slow chill of realizing something had happened in my room while my back was turned. That detail bothered me too. If I had been facing the cabinets, maybe I would have seen it move. Maybe I would have watched the teddy bear slide, lift, fall, or fly. But I did not. My back was turned, and all I got was the sound and the aftermath. That made it feel like the room had done something when I was not looking. It felt like whatever happened waited until I was turned away. That may sound dramatic, but that is how it felt at 11 years old, standing there half-changed after school, staring at a teddy bear that had no business being across the room. The bear itself was not scary before that. It was just a teddy bear. It had been part of my room for years. I had probably ignored it most days. But after that, it became different. Once an object moves in a way it should not, it stops being only an object. It becomes evidence. It becomes a question. You look at it and remember the sound it made when it hit the floor. You remember where it used to sit. You remember where it landed. You wonder whether touching it is safe or stupid. You wonder if you should put it back. You wonder if putting it back will make something else happen. I do not remember every single thing I did afterward, but I remember the feeling clearly. Confusion first, then fear, then that uncomfortable need to tell myself there had to be an explanation. I probably picked it up eventually, but I know I did not look at it the same way again. A teddy bear is supposed to be comforting. It is supposed to be one of the least threatening things in a child's room. But this one had somehow crossed the room by itself, and that ruined whatever innocent feeling it had before. What makes the memory stay with me is that there was no build-up, no creepy dream the night before, no strange whispers, no pattern of things falling around the house, at least not connected to this moment in my mind. It was just an ordinary afternoon after school. That almost makes it worse. Paranormal stories often happen at night because darkness gives fear a place to grow. But this happened during a normal time of day, while I was doing something normal, in a room I knew. It was not the kind of situation where I was already scared and might have misread things. I had no reason to be afraid until the bear hit the floor. The sound itself was real. That is another part I keep coming back to. I did not turn around randomly and notice it on the floor. I heard it fall. That means it moved while I was in the room. It was not already there from earlier. It did not fall while I was at school, and I only noticed later. I was present when it happened. My back was turned, but I heard the moment it landed. That makes the timing harder to dismiss. The bear moved in the same room with me, close enough that I heard the impact, but not in a way I could explain. I have tried to replay the physics of it many times. Maybe the bear had been leaning against something. Maybe it slowly slipped over weeks. Maybe the dusting had changed its position. Maybe it was placed differently after the deep clean than I remembered. But even then, it would still have needed to get from the back of the cabinet to the far side of the room. If it had only slipped, it would have hit the cabinet, the wall, the bed, or the floor below. It would not have launched itself outward. It would not have cleared the space the way it apparently did. It looked thrown. That is the simplest way to say it. And that word, thrown, is the part that makes the memory uncomfortable. A thrown object implies a thrower. It implies force, direction, and intention. A teddy bear lying across the room is not frightening because it is dangerous. It is frightening because it suggests that something acted on it. Something moved it with purpose. And if something unseen can move a teddy bear while you are in the room, what else can it do? That is where the fear begins to grow past the object itself. I think a lot of people have small experiences like this and never talk about them much because they sound too minor. A teddy bear fell. A toy moved. A door opened. A light turned on. None of it sounds impressive compared to bigger ghost stories. But when you are the one standing there, it does not feel minor. It feels like the rules changed for 1 second. It feels like reality made a mistake right in front of you, then went back to normal and left you with the memory. There is also something creepy about childhood bedrooms specifically. They are supposed to be safe spaces, but they also hold so much imagination and fear. When you are 11, you are old enough to know that toys are not alive, but young enough that some part of you still feels strange when they are in the dark. A teddy bear sitting high on a cabinet for years is harmless until it suddenly moves. Then, every childhood fear you thought you were too old for comes back at once. The toy becomes less like a toy and more like something that was waiting. I never found a satisfying explanation. That is the honest truth. I cannot say I know it was a ghost. I cannot say I know it was something supernatural. But I also cannot honestly say it was just gravity. Gravity does not explain the distance. It does not explain why it happened after years of staying in place. It does not explain how a bear sitting at the back of a deep cabinet ended up nearly across the room. The normal explanation fails at the exact place where the fear begins. Sometimes, when I think about it now, I wonder what I would have seen if I had turned around 1 second earlier. Would I have seen the bear flying through the air? Would I have seen it slide forward by itself? Would I have seen something near the cabinet? Or would nothing have been visible at all except the bear already falling, as if the world had skipped the moment that mattered? That question bothers me because the missing second is the whole mystery. My back was turned at the only moment that could have answered everything. And maybe that is why the memory stays sharp. I did not see the cause. I only saw the result. The room gave me just enough information to know something happened, but not enough to understand it. It left me with a sound, a teddy bear on the wrong side of the room, and a cabinet that should not have let it get there. That kind of unfinished moment can live in your mind for years because there is no ending to it. No answer comes later. No one explains it. No hidden prank is revealed. It just remains one of those things that happened. If someone else told me this story, I might try to be reasonable for them. I might say maybe it slipped, maybe it bounced, maybe the memory changed over time, maybe the bear was not as far away as it seemed. I understand all those possibilities. But I also know what it felt like in that room. I know the bear had been stable for years. I know where it had been placed. I know how deep the cabinet was. I know the bed should have caught it if it had simply fallen. I know where I found it. And I know that the position on the floor looked like it had been thrown. That was the moment my bedroom felt unfamiliar for the first time. Not permanently, maybe, but in that instant, the place I knew became a place where something could happen behind my back. The toys on the cabinet were no longer just decorations. The empty space above the furniture no longer felt empty. And the teddy bear, which had sat quietly in the same spot for 5 or 6 years, became the center of a memory I still cannot explain. It is such a small story when I say it out loud. An 11-year-old came home from school, changed clothes, heard a noise, turned around, and saw a teddy bear on the floor across the room. That is all. But the details are what make it wrong. The bear had been at the back of a deep cabinet. It had not moved for a month after being dusted. It had sat in the same area for years before that. If it had fallen, it should have landed on the bed or close to the cabinet. Instead, it was far away, like someone had thrown it while my back was turned. I still do not know what moved it. I only know that something did. I had climbed down into the Niagara Gorge near the whirlpool area, and even now, thinking back on it, I can still feel the strange weight of that place. Niagara is already powerful when you see it from the safe areas, from the railings and paths where tourists stand with cameras, where everything is marked and controlled and made to feel manageable. But when you get down closer to the gorge, especially near the whirlpool, the place feels completely different. It stops feeling like a landmark and starts feeling like something alive. The water down there is not just moving, it is fighting, twisting, crashing, pulling and turning, with a force that makes you understand very quickly how small you are. It is beautiful, but it is not gentle. It is the kind of beauty that can kill you without effort. I was alone that day, down in the wooded area near the gorge. I do not remember feeling scared at first. If anything, I felt peaceful. There is something about being alone in a place like that that can make you feel separated from the normal world. The trees around me, the sound of the water, the rocks, the air, the distance from people above, all of it made it feel like I had stepped into a quieter, older version of the earth. Even though Niagara is famous and crowded in so many areas, that spot did not feel crowded at all. It felt private, almost too private. The current in that area is incredibly powerful. Anyone who knows the whirlpool area knows that the water there is no joke. It does not move like ordinary river water. It surges and twists in a way that looks almost unnatural if you stare at it long enough. You can hear it before you really focus on it, that constant rushing roar, the crash and drag of the river forcing itself through the gorge. It is the kind of sound that fills your whole body. Even when you are not looking at the water, you feel aware of it. It is always there, moving, pulling, calling attention to itself. After walking around for a bit, I decided to sit down and relax. I was in the wooded area, away from anyone else as far as I could tell. I had not seen anybody nearby. No hikers, no tourists, no voices, no footsteps, just the trees and the water. I sat there and let myself settle. Sometimes when you are alone in nature, you start paying attention to sounds you normally ignore. Leaves moving, birds, small branches shifting, the distant movement of air. But there, the water dominated everything. The crashing was constant, like a deep, restless breathing coming from the gorge. I closed my eyes. That is when it happened. At first, I thought I heard something inside the water sound, some little shift in the noise that my mind was turning into words. When you sit near loud, steady sound for a long time, your brain can start to find patterns in it. People hear voices in fans, in rain, in static, in running water. That was the first explanation my mind reached for. I thought maybe the river was playing tricks on me. Maybe the crashing current had created a rhythm that sounded almost human for a second. But then I heard it again, and this time there was no mistaking it. It was a woman's voice, faint, but clear enough to understand. "Come to me," the sound came soft and stretched out, like the words were being carried through the air and water together. It was not loud. It was not a scream. It was not someone calling out in panic. It was quiet, almost gentle, and that made it worse. It had this strange pull to it, like it was meant for me and only me. I opened my eyes, but I did not see anyone. I sat still, listening, then I heard it again. Come to me, come to me. A chill moved through me, but I still tried to stay calm. I told myself there had to be someone nearby. Maybe another person had climbed down into the gorge and I just had not seen them. Maybe a woman was somewhere in the trees, or down closer to the water, or on a trail I could not see from where I was sitting. Sound can travel strangely in a gorge. Water and rock can bounce voices around. Maybe someone was calling to someone else. Maybe I was only hearing part of a conversation. But then the voice said more. Into the water, come to me, I'm here. That was when the peaceful feeling of the place disappeared. Those words did not sound like a normal person calling for help. They did not sound like a lost hiker trying to get attention. They sounded like an invitation. A slow, soft invitation that made no sense. Come to me. Into the water. I'm here. It was the kind of thing that should have been comforting if spoken by someone you loved, but out there, alone by the gorge with that deadly current nearby. It felt wrong. It felt like the voice wanted me to go toward the water. Not to help someone, not to look from a safe distance, but to come closer in a way that made every instinct in me tighten. I stood up and started looking around. I checked the area as best as I could. I looked through the trees, around the rocks, toward the trails, toward the water, anywhere a person might have been. I called out or made noise, trying to see if anyone would answer in a normal voice. Nothing. There was nobody there. At least nobody I could see. The place was empty around me, except for the river and the trees. Still, the voice had sounded close enough to be real. That is what disturbed me. It did not feel like a memory or a thought or something half-dreamed. I was awake. I was sitting there with my eyes closed, listening to the water, and I heard a woman's voice speaking words. Those words had direction. They had meaning, and they seemed to be calling me toward one of the most dangerous stretches of water in the area. I kept searching, but there was no woman, no person standing near the water, no one trapped somewhere visible, no one waving, no one calling out in distress, just that awful current moving with its own endless strength. I remember looking toward the water and feeling like I was being watched from a place I could not see. The voice had made the gorge feel different. Before, the water had only sounded powerful. After the voice, it sounded hungry. That may sound dramatic, but that is how it felt in the moment. The water no longer felt like background noise. It felt connected to the voice. It felt like something inside the gorge had spoken through it, or under it, or from beyond it. The words had not told me to run away. They had not warned me. They had invited me. Come to me. Into the water. That was not a message anyone alone in that place would want to hear. I did not go closer. Something in me knew not to. I had enough sense to understand that the current down there was deadly. Even if there had been someone in the water, there may have been nothing I could do alone without putting myself in danger. But the voice did not feel like a real rescue situation anyway. It felt like a lure, a ghost voice, maybe, a mimic, something using a human sound to make me look toward the water and wonder if I should approach. Eventually, after checking around and finding no one, I left. I do not remember exactly how fast I climbed back out or how many times I looked over my shoulder, but I know the mood had changed completely. I was no longer enjoying the quiet. I was no longer relaxing. I wanted distance between myself and that spot. The woods did not feel peaceful anymore. Every shadow felt like it could hide someone. Every movement in the leaves made me turn my head. And behind everything was the river, still crashing, still calling in its own natural voice. Only now, I could not stop hearing the woman's voice layered over it. The next day, we found out something that made the whole experience even worse. A woman had died at Niagara Falls on the U.S. side. Her body was found the evening after I had been in the gorge, close to the area where I had been sitting. When I heard that, my stomach dropped. It was not just fear anymore. It was the awful feeling of realizing that the voice I heard may have been connected to a real death. I had been there the day before. I had heard a woman's voice calling from near the water. I had searched and seen no one. Then the next day, a woman's body was found nearby. I still do not know what to make of that. Part of me has tried to explain it away. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe someone else was down there and I just could not find them. Maybe sound traveled from somewhere farther away, distorted by the gorge and the water. Maybe my brain turned the river into words, and the news the next day made the memory feel more meaningful than it was. Those are the explanations people reach for when they want the world to stay ordinary. But the problem is, I know what I heard. It was not just noise. It was not just the river sounding like speech. It was a faint woman's voice saying, "Come to me." It told me to come into the water. It said, "I'm here." And it happened in the same general area where a woman's body was found later. That is the part I cannot get past. The timing, the place, the words, and the feeling all fit together too tightly for me to dismiss it easily. The voice still haunts me because I do not know whether it was calling for help or trying to pull me in. That is the question I have never been able to answer. Was it the voice of someone already gone, reaching out from the place where she had ended up? Was it some kind of echo, a last trace of a person connected to the water? Or was it something else entirely, something that uses grief, death, and loneliness as bait? I do not know. I only know that it did not feel safe. There is something especially unsettling about hearing a voice when you are alone in a place where no one should be. In a city, voices are normal. In a house, voices have sources. But alone in the woods near a dangerous gorge, a voice becomes something else. It breaks the rules of the place. Your body reacts before your mind can sort it out. You listen harder. You look around. You feel the hair on your arms rise. And when the words are telling you to come closer to the water, fear takes on a very specific shape. The Niagara Gorge is beautiful, but after that day, I could not think of it as only beautiful. I thought of the current, the force of it, the way the water could take a person and make them disappear into power far beyond human strength. I thought of sitting there with my eyes closed, letting that sound fill my head, and then hearing something speak through it. I thought of the woman whose body was found later, and I wondered if I had been closer to something tragic than I understood in the moment. The fact that I looked everywhere and saw nobody is what still bothers me most. If I had seen someone, even far away, even just a shape near the trees, I could have built a normal explanation. If a woman had been walking nearby and calling out, I could have accepted that. If there had been other hikers, tourists, or people down by the water, I could have told myself the voice belonged to one of them. But I checked. I looked around. I saw no one. The area felt empty, and yet the voice had been there. I have replayed the words in my head many times. Come to me. Into the water. I'm here. The longer I think about them, the more wrong they sound. A person in danger would not usually say it like that. They might yell for help. They might scream. They might call out, "Help me." They might sound panicked, desperate, or weak. This voice was different. It was soft and pulling, almost like it was trying to persuade me instead of alert me. That is what makes it feel less like a rescue and more like a lure. And maybe that is why it stayed with me so strongly. I did not just hear a ghostly voice. I heard a voice that seemed to want me to move toward danger. It did not say, "Stay away." It did not say, "Help." It said, "Come." That one word changes everything. Come to me. Come into the water. I'm here. There is something ancient and terrifying about that kind of invitation near deadly water. People have told stories for centuries about voices near rivers, lakes, and oceans, voices that call people closer. I never understood how frightening that idea really was until I heard it myself. The next day's discovery made the memory impossible to forget. If nothing had happened afterward, maybe the voice would have become just one strange experience in nature. I might have told people I heard something weird near the gorge once and left it at that. But knowing a woman had died and was found near where I had been changed the whole meaning of it. It turned the voice from strange into haunting. It made me wonder if I had brushed against the edge of someone else's tragedy without knowing it. I also think about how alone I was. If I had given in to curiosity and gone closer to the water, no one would have been there to stop me. That thought scares me. The current was strong. The area was dangerous. A slip, a wrong step, or a moment of confusion could have ended badly. And if the voice had been enough to make me move toward the water, even just to check, I might have put myself in danger for something I could not see. That realization makes the whole experience feel even darker. It is one thing to hear a voice. It is another to realize the voice was calling you toward a place that could kill you. I did not follow it. I am grateful for that. I stayed back, searched from where I could, and left when I found no one. But the memory of the voice followed me out of the gorge. It stayed with me after I heard the news. It still stays with me now. Sometimes the mind forgets exact sounds over time, but it keeps the feeling. I may not be able to reproduce the voice perfectly anymore, but I remember the softness of it. I remember the stretched out words. I remember the way it seemed to come through the roar of the water instead of being drowned by it. I remember the cold feeling in my chest when I realized there was no one there. That is why, whenever I think of the Niagara Gorge, I do not only think of the view or the power of the river, I think of sitting alone in the foggy, wooded quiet near the whirlpool, closing my eyes to listen to the water and hearing a faint woman's voice call to me from nowhere. I think of searching and finding nothing. I think of learning the next day that a woman had died and been found near where I had been. And I think of those words, still clear enough in my memory to make my skin tighten. Come to me, into the water. I'm here. I do not know what I heard that day. I do not know if it was a spirit, an echo, a warning, a lure, or something my mind created from the sound of the river. But I know it felt real. I know there was nobody there when I looked. And I know that voice still haunts me. Before the next witness tells their story, take a moment to subscribe to Nachtmeyer Witness. This channel is for the late hours, when sleep is close, but the mind is still awake enough to notice every sound in the room. New true stories arrive here for anyone drawn to strange encounters, uneasy memories, and nights that never felt normal again. Leave a like if the stories have pulled you in so far. Now, let's return to the darkness. This story has always felt deeply creepy to me, partly because of what happened, but also because of how young my mom was when she saw it. There are some memories children carry that they do not fully understand at the time, and that is what makes them even more disturbing later. A child can witness something horrible and still process it through a child's mind, through curiosity, confusion, and innocence. They may not understand death yet. They may not understand violence the way adults do. They may only know that something looks wrong, that the adults around them are acting different, and that a moment they cannot explain has suddenly entered their life. When my mom was a small child, she lived on a reservation. It was the kind of place where native people had been forced to live, a place shaped by poverty, displacement, and hardship that had been pushed onto generations of families. Life there was not easy. The adults had their own burdens, their own pain, and their own struggles that children could sense even when they did not fully understand them. My mom was very young then, too young to understand the full history around her, too young to know all the reasons people were suffering, but old enough to remember certain things clearly. And one of the things she remembered was a night when a couple was arguing. She could hear them from where she was. I do not remember exactly what she said she heard, and maybe she never repeated all of it in detail, but she heard enough to know there was a fight. Not just shouting, not just a normal argument between two adults, but something physical and violent. She heard the man hurting the woman. She heard sounds a small child should never have to hear, the kind of sounds that make the air feel different even if you do not fully understand what they mean. There was anger, fear, and violence in it, and then, at some point, the man left the woman in a ditch. That image alone is awful. A woman hurt and left outside like she did not matter, like her life could be thrown away at the edge of the road or near the water and forgotten. For an adult, that is already horrifying. For a child, it would be strange in a different way. A child might not understand whether the woman was badly hurt, sleeping, hiding, or needing help. They might not understand why the adults were not immediately doing something, or why the world had suddenly become quiet after so much noise. Children notice the aftermath of adult violence in ways adults sometimes underestimate. They may not know the words for what happened, but they remember the feeling of it. The next morning, my mom went to see if the woman was still there. That is such a childlike thing to do, and that is what makes the story hurt and scare me at the same time. An adult might have stayed away, called for help, or understood the danger of going near the scene. But a little girl is curious. A little girl hears something terrible in the night and wakes up wondering what happened to the lady. She does not understand crime scenes or death or the danger of seeing something her mind is not ready to carry. She just knows there was a woman in a ditch, and she wants to know if she is still there. And she was. My mom found her in the ditch, with her head under water. The water was still enough that my mom could see her face beneath it. That detail is the one that makes the whole story feel almost unreal, like a nightmare image that should not belong to a real childhood memory. The woman's face was visible under the water. Her eyes were open wide, unblinking. My mom could see them staring through the water, fixed and lifeless, though she did not understand that at first. To a small child, open eyes can look like awareness. If someone's eyes are open, they seem awake. They seem present. They seem like they might speak at any moment. And then, according to my mom, the woman's mouth moved. That is the part that still sends a chill through me. My mom said she heard the woman say, "Want to go swimming, little girl? Come swim with me." There are so many things about that sentence that are terrifying. The softness of it, the way it sounds almost friendly, the way it speaks to a child as if inviting her to play, the fact that it came from a woman whose head was underwater, whose eyes were wide open and unblinking, whose body had been left in a ditch after a violent night. It was not a scream for help. It was not a warning. It was not a cry of pain. It was an invitation. Want to go swimming? Come swim with me. For a child, that might not immediately sound evil. Children are used to adults asking them to play, to come along, to do something fun. Swimming is something children understand as play. The words themselves were not violent. That is what makes them worse. They took something innocent and placed it in the mouth of someone who was already dead. They turned play into a lure. They turned a ditch of water into something that sounded almost welcoming. A little girl standing there, looking down at a woman underwater, might not know she was looking at death. She might only know that the lady was asking her to swim. My mom did not understand. She went to her mother and asked if she could go swimming with the lady. I cannot imagine what that must have felt like for my grandma. To hear her small child ask something like that, so innocent and so horrifying at the same time. My mom was not trying to be disturbing. She was not making a joke. She was repeating what she believed had happened. A woman in the ditch had invited her to swim. My mom wanted to know if she was allowed. That is the kind of sentence that would make an adult's blood go cold before the child even understands why. From what I remember, my grandma covered her eyes and told her that the woman had passed away. That was probably all she could say in that moment. How do you explain something like that to a little child? How do you explain that the woman was dead, that what she saw was not a normal person speaking, that she should not go near the water, that what happened the night before was violence, that the world can be cruel in ways a child should not yet know? Maybe my grandma did not want her to see any more than she already had. Maybe covering her eyes was the only protection she could offer after it was already too late to stop her from seeing the woman's face. That moment has always stuck with me, because it combines real human horror with something that feels impossible. The human horror is clear. A woman was attacked by a man and left in a ditch. That is already tragic and terrifying. But then there is the other part, the part where my mother, as a small child, saw the dead woman's mouth move and heard her invite her into the water. That turns the memory into something else. It becomes more than a story about violence. It becomes a story about death, calling to a child in a voice that sounded almost gentle. I do not know what my mom actually heard. Maybe there is some explanation, though I cannot think of one that feels comforting. Maybe the movement of the water made it look like the woman's mouth was moving. Maybe my mom's young mind tried to make sense of an image too horrible to understand and created words around it. Maybe she heard someone nearby say something, and her memory attached it to the woman. Those are the reasonable explanations people might reach for. But the way she remembered it, the words came from the woman herself. The invitation was direct. It was personal. Want to go swimming, little girl? Come swim with me. That is the part that feels like a warning from some older kind of fear. People have told stories for centuries about water calling to children, about spirits in lakes, rivers, ditches, and wells, about voices that invite the living to join the dead. Whether you believe in that kind of thing or not, there is something deeply unsettling about water and death together. Water can hide a body. It can distort a face. It can make stillness look like movement. It can carry sound in strange ways. And for a child, water can still look like something fun, even when it is dangerous. The words "come swim with me" turn that danger into a trap. I also think about the woman. Before she became the figure in this story, she was a person. She had a life, a voice, a name, maybe family, maybe people who loved her, maybe dreams that had nothing to do with that ditch. She was not only a frightening image in a child's memory, she was a woman who had been hurt and abandoned. That is important to remember, because stories like this can easily turn the dead into symbols of fear. But underneath the creepy part is a real tragedy. A man harmed her. She was left outside. In the morning, a child found her. That should never have happened. The fact that my mom was so young makes it even harder to think about. Children should not have to discover dead bodies. They should not have to hear violence in the night. They should not have to ask their mother if they can go swimming with a dead woman, because they do not understand what they have seen. Childhood is supposed to protect you from certain truths for as long as possible. But poverty, violence, and hard living conditions often take that protection away. My mom saw something that no child should have seen, and because she was a child, she understood it in the only way she could. I wonder how long it took her to really understand what had happened. Maybe in that moment she accepted that the lady had passed away, because that was what my grandma told her. But as she got older, the memory must have changed shape. The eyes underwater, the moving mouth, the invitation, the knowledge of the fight the night before. At some point, the pieces would have connected in a darker way. The child's memory would become an adult's memory, and the innocence of the question would become something horrifying. She had not simply seen a lady in a ditch. She had seen a murdered woman, and she had believed the dead woman was asking her to join her in the water. That is what makes the story so haunting. It is not just a ghost story. It is not just a crime story. It sits somewhere between the two. The violence was real. The body was real. The child was real. The voice, whatever it was, became part of the memory forever. Maybe it was the mind protecting itself. Maybe it was something spiritual. Maybe it was the dead woman's last echo. Maybe it was something darker, using the shape of the dead to call a child closer. I do not know. The uncertainty is what keeps it from fading. The image of those eyes is hard to shake too. Wide open, unblinking, visible under the water. Eyes are one of the main ways we recognize life in a person. When eyes are open, but no life is behind them, it creates a wrongness that even children can feel. My mom may not have understood death clearly, but she must have sensed that something was not right. Still, the mouth moving and the voice calling her turned that wrongness into confusion. Was the lady awake? Was she playing? Was she asking for help? Was she inviting her? A child's mind tries to make sense of things through simple categories. Alive or asleep, friendly or scary, play or not play. But that scene did not fit any safe category. My grandma covering her eyes may have been an instinct more than a decision. Sometimes adults do that when they cannot undo what a child has seen. They block the view, pull the child away, and try to put a hand between innocence and horror, even if the image has already entered. It is a heartbreaking gesture, because it comes too late, and yet it is still full of love. My grandma could not erase the woman's face from my mom's memory. She could not make the night before unhappen, but she could cover her eyes and tell her, as gently as possible, that the lady was gone. I think about that little girl walking to the ditch in the morning, probably not expecting anything as final as death. Maybe the air was still cool. Maybe the ground was damp. Maybe there were other people around. Or maybe she went alone before anyone realized. She looked down and saw the woman. She saw her face under the water. Then came that impossible invitation. A small child being asked by the dead to come swim. It sounds like something from a horror story, but for my mom, it was a memory from childhood. The scariest part is how close danger came to her without touching her. She did not go into the water. She asked her mother first. That one choice may have mattered. If she had been a little more curious, a little more trusting, or if the voice had sounded more playful, would she have stepped closer? Would she have tried to help? Would she have leaned down? I do not know, and I do not like thinking about it. Children can be pulled toward danger by innocence. They do not always understand that something is wrong until an adult stops them. In that moment, my grandma stopped her. Even now, the phrase stays with me. Want to go swimming, little girl? Come swim with me. It sounds almost sweet if you separate it from the scene. That is what makes it terrifying. A friendly invitation from an impossible mouth. A child's activity spoken from a dead woman underwater. The words are simple, but the meaning beneath them is not. They feel like a hand reaching from a place no living child should go. That story is one of those family memories that becomes hard to categorize. You do not know whether to call it paranormal, traumatic, psychological, or all of those things at once. My mom heard violence. She saw the aftermath. She saw the woman's face. She heard something she should not have heard. And then her own mother had to explain death to her in the gentlest way she could, while also trying to shield her from seeing more. It is creepy, but it is also deeply sad. A woman lost her life. A child lost a little bit of innocence. A mother had to protect her child from a horror already witnessed. And the place itself, that reservation shaped by poverty and forced living conditions, held another story of pain that probably did not get the attention it deserved. That is often how it happens in poor communities. Tragedies occur, people suffer, and the wider world barely notices. But the people who live there remember. Children remember. Families remember. The land remembers in its own way. For my mom, the memory did not fade into nothing. It stayed because it was too strange and too frightening. She had seen the woman in the ditch. She had seen the open eyes under the water. She had seen the mouth move. She had heard the voice ask her to swim. Then she had asked her own mother for permission, not understanding that the woman was dead. That combination of innocence and horror is what makes the story so powerful. It is not just what happened to the woman. It is how a child stood on the edge of it, close enough to be called. I do not know what anyone is supposed to do with a memory like that except carry it. There is no neat explanation. There is no comforting ending. The woman did not get up. My mom did not get to forget. My grandma could only cover her eyes and tell her the truth in the softest words she had. And somewhere in the middle of all that pain is the voice my mom heard, still echoing across the years. Want to go swimming? Little girl, come swim with me. That is the part that makes the hair stand up on my arms, not because it is loud or violent, but because it is quiet, because it sounds like an invitation, because it came from a woman who was already gone, because my mom was young enough to almost believe it was only about swimming, and because, if my grandma had not stopped her, I do not know how close that little girl might have gone to the water. The house I grew up in was odd. That is the simplest way I can say it, because any stronger word makes it sound like I am trying too hard to convince people. I am not even sure I want to call it haunted, because I do not know what was going on there. I do not know if it was ghosts, energy, the house itself, something attached to the land, or something nobody has the right name for. All I know is that the place never felt completely normal. It had a feeling to it, and once you lived there long enough, you could not ignore it. I was not the only one who noticed either. Other people had strange experiences there too. Family, friends, visitors, people who spent enough time inside those walls. It was not one of those things where one nervous kid imagines monsters in every shadow. The house had a way of making people uncomfortable, and every now and then, it would do something that made the discomfort impossible to explain away. There were little things over the years, moments that were strange, but not always enough on their own to make you run out of the house. Things would make noise when they should not. There were strange lights, orbs, phantom crash sounds that made everyone think something huge had fallen, only for nothing to be out of place. Things turned on when they were not plugged in, or when they did not even have batteries in them. That kind of thing happened from time to time, not constantly, but enough that the house earned a reputation among the people who knew it. The energy there was off. You could feel it in certain rooms, in certain corners, at certain times of day. Sometimes it was quiet for weeks, and then something would happen that reminded you the house was never fully still. But one experience in particular was so terrifying that I still remember it clearly. I was 14 years old, home alone in the middle of the day. That part matters, because this was not late at night when every sound becomes bigger and your imagination is already awake. It was daytime. The house should have felt safer. Sunlight has a way of making people feel protected, like scary things belong only to darkness. But whatever was happening in that house did not seem to care what time it was. It did not wait for midnight or storms or flickering lights. It happened in the middle of an ordinary day, when I was alone and had no reason to be scared until the moment it started. I was in my room on the 3rd floor, sitting on my bed with my back against the outside wall. I was probably doing something normal, maybe reading, listening to music, thinking about nothing important. Just being a 14-year-old in my own space. My room should have been the one place in the house where I felt most comfortable. It was mine. I knew the walls, the bed, the way the light came in, the normal creaks and sounds. I was not scared. I was not waiting for something to happen. Then someone knocked on the wall right next to my head. It was not a vague sound. It was not the house settling. It was not something falling somewhere else and echoing through the walls. It was a knock, right beside my head. Clear, close, deliberate. At first, I ignored it. That was my instinct, because sometimes when something strange happens, your mind refuses to take it seriously right away. You tell yourself not to react. You pretend you did not hear it. You wait for a normal explanation to show up before fear has a chance to take over. So I sat there and tried to act like it had not happened. Maybe it was a pipe. Maybe it was a branch. Maybe it was some weird shift in the siding. Maybe I had heard it wrong. Then it happened again. Rap, 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 loud and clear. This time there was no pretending. It was directly next to my head, on the outside wall, like someone standing on the other side had lifted their hand and knocked 3 times. I froze. My whole body locked up while my brain started racing through explanations. I was on the 3rd floor. For someone to knock on that wall from outside, they would have had to be on a very tall ladder. Not a small ladder, not something someone could casually lean against the house, but a tall one. And there was nothing outside to climb. No balcony, no tree right against the wall, no roof edge someone could stand on. Just siding. The kind of outside wall where no human being should be able to knock unless they had equipment, time, and a reason to be up there. That was when panic started pushing in. I tried to hold it off. I remember sitting there, frozen, forcing myself to think logically. Maybe someone was outside with a ladder. But why? Why would they climb up to the 3rd floor and knock on my bedroom wall in the middle of the day? And how had I not heard a ladder being placed there? How had no one seen them? Maybe it came from inside the wall. But that was not better. Things inside walls are supposed to be pipes, animals, wiring, normal house noises. This sounded like knuckles. This sounded like attention. This sounded like someone wanted me to know they were there. I did not move. I did not speak. I just sat with my back against that wall, suddenly aware of how close my head had been to the sound. The knock had happened inches from me. It felt personal, not just a noise in the house, but a noise directed at me. Then I heard someone call my name from downstairs. That was worse. It was a woman's voice, pleasant, almost sweet, but not in a comforting way. It had this tone to it like it was hiding a secret, like it knew something I did not and was enjoying that. It was not my mother. It was not my sister. I knew their voices. This was neither of them. I was home alone. No one was supposed to be in the house. Yet from downstairs, in a voice I did not recognize, someone called my name. My fear changed shape in that moment. The knocking on the third-floor wall had been impossible, but maybe I could still imagine some weird physical explanation if I tried hard enough. A sound traveling through the structure. A strange animal. A neighbor. Something, but a voice calling my name from inside the house was different. That meant something was in there with me, or at least something wanted me to believe it was. And it knew my name. It called again. Then a third time. Each time the tone was teasing, almost playful. That made it feel even more wrong. If it had sounded angry, I might have understood the fear differently. If it had sounded like someone needed help, I might have been confused enough to answer. But this was pleasant in a way that felt fake, like someone putting on a friendly voice to lure a child closer. It was the kind of voice that told me not to trust it. Every instinct in my body screamed that I should get out of the house, but there was a problem. To leave, I had to go downstairs. I had to pass whatever was calling my name. That realization trapped me for a few seconds. My bedroom was on the third floor. The voice was downstairs. The exit was downstairs. There was no way out that did not take me toward it. I could not climb out the window. I could not call anyone fast enough to feel safe. I could not stay in the room, because the knocking had just come from the wall beside my head, and the voice was calling from below. It felt like the house had cut off every safe direction at once. Behind me, the wall had knocked. Below me, the voice was waiting. I stood there frozen, trying to decide what to do, but there was no calm decision to make. Fear took over, not the kind where you think carefully, but the kind where your body makes the choice before your mind finishes the sentence. My flight response kicked in completely. I ran. I bolted out of my room and down the stairs as fast as I could. I do not remember every step clearly because I was moving on pure panic. I remember the feeling of the staircase under my feet, the desperate need to not slow down, and the terrible thought that something might appear in front of me at any second. I had to pass through the front room to get to the door, and that meant crossing the part of the house where the voice had seemed to come from. I did not look around carefully. I did not check rooms. I did not call out. I just ran, screaming profanities as loud as I could, partly out of fear and partly like I was trying to scare back whatever had scared me. Then I hit the door and got out. The second I was outside, I did not stop close to the house. I crossed to the park across the street and stayed there. I sat there for 3 hours, waiting for my mom and sister to come home. 3 hours is a long time to sit outside watching your own house, but I was too scared to go back in. I watched the doors the entire time. I kept expecting someone to leave. Some woman, some intruder, someone who would prove that what I heard had a normal source. If someone had walked out, I might have been terrified, but at least I would have had an answer. But no one came out. No one opened the door. No one moved behind the windows. The house just sat there, looking normal from the outside, like it had not just driven me out in broad daylight. That may have been the worst part after the panic faded. The house looked ordinary. From across the street, it was just my home. Walls, windows, roof, front door. Nothing about it screamed danger. There was no figure in the window, no evidence of a break-in, no sign of anyone inside. But I knew what had happened. I knew someone or something had knocked beside my head on the third floor, then called my name from downstairs in a voice I did not know. While I sat in the park, I started to wonder if maybe something was wrong with me. That is what fear does after the immediate danger passes. It turns inward. You start questioning your own mind. Did I hear it wrong? Did I imagine the voice? Was I half asleep? Did some sound from outside become my name in my head? Was the knock really something else? Was I just a scared kid overreacting? I wanted a logical explanation so badly that I almost considered blaming myself. But the problem was, I was not the only one who had experiences in that house. Almost everyone who spent real time there had something happen sooner or later. That made it harder to dismiss. When my mom and sister finally came home, I had been watching for hours, and no one had left the house. There was no hidden person slipping out the back, no explanation waiting on the porch. Nothing. The voice, whoever or whatever it was, had not belonged to any human being I could find. If someone had been inside, they would have had to stay hidden for hours, then vanish without me seeing. And that did not make sense. But nothing about the experience made sense. The house continued to have strange things happen after that. Orbs would appear, phantom crashes would sound through the house, loud enough that people would go looking for whatever had fallen, only to find nothing disturbed. Things would turn on even when they were not plugged in or did not have batteries. That kind of event is hard to explain because it crosses from creepy into impossible. An appliance or toy or object with no power source should not activate. A huge crashing sound should leave a mess somewhere. Lights or orbs should not just appear and vanish. Yet things like that happened there sporadically, just often enough to keep everyone uneasy. I am not saying it was haunted, because I truly do not know. I do not want to pretend I have answers I do not have, but I know the energy in that house was off. Some places feel warm, even if they are old. Some houses feel safe the moment you walk in. Ours did not always feel that way. It had areas that felt heavy. It had silence that sometimes felt too aware. It had the feeling of being watched when no one was there, and every so often it would produce something so specific and frightening that you could not call it imagination. The knocking beside my head was one of those things. The voice calling my name was another. Together, they felt almost coordinated. First, something got my attention in the one place no person should have been able to reach, the outside wall of my third-floor bedroom. Then, once I was already scared and frozen, something called to me from inside the house. It felt like a trap, like one thing behind me, one thing below me, like the house wanted me to move, but not in a direction that felt safe. The voice downstairs sounded pleasant, but that only made it worse. A pleasant voice in an empty house can be more terrifying than a scream, because it suggests intelligence. It suggests intention. It suggests something knows how to sound inviting. I sometimes think about what might have happened if I had answered. What if I had called back, Mom, even though I knew it was not her? What if I had gone downstairs slowly, trying to find the woman? What if I had followed the voice instead of running past it? I hate thinking about that. My instincts told me not to engage. They told me to run, and I listened. Maybe nothing would have happened. Maybe I would have found an empty room. Maybe the voice would have stopped. But I am glad I did not test it. Something about that tone told me it was not calling me for any good reason. There is a particular fear that comes from hearing your own name when you are alone. A random noise can be ignored. A whisper can be questioned. But your name is personal. It cuts through doubt. It means the sound is meant for you. When the wrong voice says it, especially from inside your own house, it feels like a violation. It knows you. It can reach into your life enough to call you. And if it can call you, what else can it do? After I moved out at 18, I lived in numerous other homes, and I never experienced anything like that again. That is another reason I do not believe it was just me. If I had continued hearing voices, seeing things, or experiencing impossible noises everywhere I lived, then maybe I would have had to ask harder questions about myself. but I did not. The weirdness stayed with that house. Once I left, that level of activity did not follow me. I have lived in other places, and they have had normal house noises, normal creaks, normal weird moments that can be explained. Nothing like the knocking, nothing like the voice, nothing like objects turning on without power or phantom crashes that left no damage. That house was different. Looking back, I think the scariest part was not knowing what it wanted. If a place is simply noisy, you can learn to live with it. If a house settles, you ignore it. If an old pipe knocks, you get used to the sound. But when something calls your name in a voice that is not your family, when it sounds like it is teasing you, when it happens right after something knocks on a wall 3 floors up from outside, you cannot treat it like a normal house sound. It feels aware, and awareness is what makes the unknown frightening. The memory of sitting in the park for 3 hours still feels lonely. I was a 14-year-old kid who had been scared out of my own house in the middle of the day. I sat there watching the doors, waiting for proof that some person would come out and explain everything. But the proof never came. All I saw was the house, quiet and still, holding whatever had happened inside it. When my family came home, life had to continue like normal, but for me, something had changed. Home was no longer automatically safe. My room was no longer just my room. The wall next to my bed was no longer just a wall. The downstairs was no longer just downstairs. The house had shown me that it could speak in ways it should not. I do not know why that house was like that. I do not know if something happened there before us, or if certain places simply carry strange energy, or if some houses become magnets for things we do not understand. I only know that many people had experiences there, and mine was one of the worst. A knock beside my head from outside a 3rd-floor wall. A woman's voice downstairs calling my name in a teasing tone. No one home. No one leaving. No explanation. Just fear so strong that I ran out screaming and waited across the street for hours. People can call it haunted if they want. I usually just say it was odd, because odd is true and leaves room for what I do not know. But there are moments from that house that still feel too sharp to be dismissed. That day when I was 14 is one of them. I was awake. It was the middle of the day. I heard the knocks. I heard the voice. I knew it was not my mother or my sister. And I knew, with every instinct I had, that whatever was calling my name was not something I should go toward. That is why I ran, and I have never regretted it. Once, during a long road trip, I saw something so strange and so real-looking that it scared me badly enough to stop driving immediately. I know now that exhaustion probably had a lot to do with it. I can say that clearly because I was tired in a way that does not feel like normal tiredness. It was late, the road had been going on forever, and I had an infant with me, which meant my sleep had already been broken for days or weeks before that trip even started. Anyone who has traveled with a baby knows that kind of tired. It is not just feeling sleepy. It is a deep, heavy kind of exhaustion that sits behind your eyes and makes your thoughts feel slower than usual. You can still function, but everything feels stretched thin. We had been on the road for a long time. It was one of those drives where the night seems endless and every mile looks almost the same. The darkness outside the car pressed against the windows, and the headlights only showed us a small piece of the road at a time. The inside of the car had that quiet, late-night travel feeling, with soft engine noise, the occasional sound from the baby, and the strange stillness that comes when everyone is too tired to talk much. My husband was with me, and at that point I was the one driving. I kept telling myself I was fine. Drivers do that. You feel your body asking for rest, but you convince yourself you can make it a little farther. Just one more stretch. Just a little longer. Just until the next stop. There was something on the dashboard that became important later, though at the time it was nothing. My husband had a baseball cap, and he had stuck it up in the middle of the dash. The bill was facing toward the back of the car. It was just sitting there, an ordinary hat in an ordinary place, probably put there without much thought. During a road trip, things end up everywhere. Drinks, snacks, blankets, toys, maps, chargers, jackets, baby things, and whatever else you need within reach. The baseball cap was just another object in the car. Nothing creepy, nothing strange, nothing I had any reason to think about. The night outside was bright in a particular way because there was a full moon. That made the road feel different from a completely dark drive. Full moonlight can make the world look almost silver, especially when you are driving late and there are not many lights around. It lights up shapes without making them fully clear. Trees, bridges, signs, and roadside shadows all take on this slightly unreal look. You can see more than you would on a moonless night, but what you see feels colder and stranger. The road was still dark, but not completely. The moon was doing just enough to give the car and the world outside it a ghostly kind of light. At some point, I drove under a bridge. It was one of those quick moments that happens constantly on long drives. The car enters the shadow, the light changes, the sound shifts slightly, and then a second later, you come out the other side. Most of the time, you barely notice it. But this time, that tiny change in light created one of the most frightening things I have ever seen. The car passed under the bridge, and for that brief moment, everything inside went darker. Then, at the exact instant the full moonlight re-illuminated the car after the bridge shadow, I saw a shadow man crawl up out of the dashboard. For 1 second, it looked absolutely real. It did not look like a vague shape. It did not look like a trick of light at first. It looked like a figure was coming out of the dash, wearing my husband's baseball cap on its head. The hat, which had been sitting there with the bill facing backward into the car, suddenly became part of the figure. In that flash of moonlight, my exhausted brain turned the shape of the hat and the shadows around it into something alive. But in the moment, I did not understand it that way. In the moment, I saw a man made of shadow pulling himself up from inside the dashboard. He had his head out first, then an arm, then one shoulder. It looked like he was crawling upward, like something had been hidden under the surface of the dash and was climbing into the car. The movement felt real. That is the part that still bothers me when I think about it. It was not just that I saw a face or a dark shape. I saw action. I saw him emerging. I saw enough of his body to register that he was coming out, that he was entering the space with us. It happened fast, but the image was complete in the way nightmares are complete. Head, arm, shoulder, hat, a shadow man rising from the dash in the moonlight. I gasped and flinched so hard that it broke the spell. That was the moment my brain caught up with itself. The fear hit first, sharp and immediate, and then almost in the same breath came the realization of how tired I was. I knew I had just seen something that could not be real. I knew there could not be a person crawling out of the dashboard. I knew the baseball cap, the bridge shadow, and the full moonlight had probably lined up with my exhaustion in exactly the wrong way. But knowing that did not make the fear vanish instantly. My body had already reacted as if a person had appeared inside the car. My heart was racing. My hands felt wrong on the wheel. I did not trust myself anymore. That is the scariest part about seeing something when you are driving. If you are lying in bed and you see a shape in the dark, you can turn on a light. If you are sitting at home and you hallucinate something for a second, you can stop, breathe, and get your bearings. But when you are driving, your reaction matters immediately. A gasp, a flinch, a jerk of the wheel, even 1 second of confusion can be dangerous. I had an infant in the car. My husband was there. We were moving at highway speed. I could not afford to be so tired that a baseball cap and moonlight could turn into a shadow man in front of me. So I pulled over right away. There was no debate in my mind. I was done driving. Maybe nothing supernatural had happened. Maybe it was just exhaustion and lighting and my brain misfiring for a single second. But that single second was enough. It showed me that I was too tired to be behind the wheel. My husband took over and drove us the rest of the way. I remember the relief of not having to stare at the road anymore, not having to force my eyes open and prove to myself that I was fine. I could sit there shaken and let someone else handle the driving. Even after I understood what had probably happened, I could not shake the image. The hat on the dash had been so ordinary before. Afterward, I could not look at it the same way. It had become the headwear of the thing my mind created, the detail that made the shadow man feel specific instead of random. Without the cap, maybe it would have been only a dark shape. With the cap, it looked like someone. It looked like a figure with intention, crawling up into the car. That is what made it so creepy. My brain did not just see a blob or a flicker. It built a person. It gave him posture. It gave him motion. It gave him a hat. It gave him the impossible act of rising out of the dashboard, like the car itself had opened and something inside it had decided to come through. And for that single second, before I realized how tired I was, I believed what I was seeing. Not in a thoughtful way. I did not have time to analyze it. My body believed it before my mind could object. I have thought about that moment many times since then, especially because I know how easy it is to explain and still how hard it is to forget. Exhaustion can do strange things. A tired brain can misread shadows, lights, reflections, and movement. Driving late at night with a baby in the car, under a full moon, passing through a bridge shadow, with a baseball cap sitting in a strange position on the dash, is exactly the kind of setup that could create a visual mistake. I understand that. I can say, logically, that it was probably a hallucination or a misperception caused by fatigue. But the memory still feels different from simply seeing something wrong. It felt real. For 1 second, it looked absolutely real. That is the part people do not always understand unless they have experienced something like it. A hallucination or misperception does not always look blurry or dreamlike. Sometimes it is sharp. Sometimes your brain presents it to you with total confidence. Sometimes the impossible appears with the same clarity as everything else, and only after the fear hits do you realize it cannot be true. I also think about what would have happened if I had been fully awake and rested when I saw it. That question bothers me. If I had not been exhausted, would I have seen only a hat on the dash when the moonlight came back? Would the bridge shadow have passed over the car and meant nothing? Or would I still have seen something rise up? I do not know. Part of me wants to believe tiredness explains all of it, because that is the safer answer. It means the fear came from inside my own exhausted brain, not from anything in the car with us. But another part of me remembers how real it looked, how perfectly timed it was, and how complete the figure seemed in that flash of light. It was like the darkness under the bridge covered the car for a second, and when the moon returned, it revealed something that had not been there before. That is the image that sticks with me. The bridge shadow swallowing the car, then the full moonlight opening it back up, and in that instant, a figure climbing out of the dash. There was something almost cinematic about it, but not in a fun way. It was too sudden, too clear, too close. The shadow man was not outside on the road. He was not in the distance. He was inside the car, right there in front of me, appearing from a place where no person could be. The closeness is what made me flinch so hard. If I had seen something outside the windshield, I might have braked or swerved. But this thing was inside with us. It felt like a violation of the safe space of the car. Cars on long road trips can start to feel like little moving homes, especially at night. You have your family, your things, your baby, your tired conversations, and the road ahead. The outside world is kept on the other side of the glass. But this shadow man appeared inside that protected space, rising out of the dashboard like the boundary between safe and unsafe had failed. After my husband took over, I kept replaying it in my head. The bridge, the moon, the hat, the shape, the gasp, the instant realization. I probably explained it to him right away, because how could I not? I had pulled over because I saw something that was not there. That is not the kind of thing you keep to yourself when someone else is in the car and your baby is riding with you. I knew I needed to stop. I knew the responsible thing was to hand over the wheel, no matter how embarrassed or shaken I felt. There is something humbling about realizing your own mind can scare you that badly. We like to think we are reliable witnesses to reality, especially when we are awake. We trust what we see. We trust that if something appears in front of us, it must be there. But fatigue can loosen that trust. It can take normal objects and turn them into threats. It can take the quick shift from shadow to moonlight and build a whole figure out of it. It can make your body react as if danger is real before your logic has a chance to catch up. And still, even knowing that, I cannot say the experience was nothing. It was something. Maybe it was only a warning from my own brain that I was too exhausted to drive. Maybe that is all it was, and if so, I am grateful it happened before anything worse did. My mind scared me into stopping, and that may have kept us safe. But the way it appeared, the exact shape of it, the shadow man with the baseball cap crawling out of the dash, remains one of the creepiest things I have ever seen. I can still picture it. The dark car interior, the soft sleeping presence of the baby, the long road, the bridge shadow, the bright return of the full moon, the cap on the dash suddenly becoming a head, the shadow rising, the arm and shoulder coming out, the impossible sense that a person was emerging from a place where there was no space for a person to be. Then my gasp, my flinch, and the snap back into reality. It lasted only a second, but sometimes a second is enough. A second can show you something your mind refuses to forget. A second can make you pull off the road and hand over the keys. A second can turn an ordinary baseball cap into a memory that still feels haunted years later. I do not know what I would have done if I had been fully awake and rested and that same thing had happened. Maybe I would have screamed. Maybe I would have crashed. Maybe I would have stared at it longer and seen it more clearly. Maybe the very fact that I was tired is the only reason it happened at all. That is the explanation I live with because it makes the most sense. But sense does not erase the feeling. For 1 second, there was a shadow man in the car with us, wearing my husband's baseball cap, crawling out of the dashboard under the light of the full moon. And for that 1 second, before logic came back, it was absolutely real. I was driving overnight by myself to visit some friends, and it turned into one of those moments where nothing technically happened to me, but everything about it felt wrong enough that I still think about it. It was not some big dramatic chase. Nobody attacked me. There was no screaming, no weapon, no police report, no clear ending where I found out who the guy was or what he wanted. But sometimes the scariest things are the ones that stop just short of becoming something obvious. They leave you with 1,000 questions because you know you reacted in time, but you also know that if you had stayed even a minute longer, the story might have gone somewhere much worse. I had gotten off work at around 10:30 p.m. and decided to drive a state over to visit some friends. At the time, it seemed normal enough. I was tired, but not so tired that I thought I could not handle the drive. It was late, the roads were dark, and I had that quiet overnight driving mindset where you are just trying to keep moving, watching the headlights stretch out in front of you, letting the miles pass. Driving at night can be peaceful in a way, especially when there is not much traffic. The world feels emptied out. Gas stations, restaurants, houses, and exits pass by like little islands of light in the dark. You feel alone, but usually in a controlled way, like the car is your safe little space and everything else is outside the glass. Around midnight, I realized my gas tank was getting low. Not completely empty yet, but low enough that I had to start thinking seriously about it. I saw a sign that said there was a rest stop about 40 miles ahead. Maybe I could have pushed it. Maybe the car would have made it. But I did not want to take that chance. Running out of gas alone on the highway in the middle of the night, somewhere between states, sounded like a terrible idea. So I made the responsible choice and got off the highway to find gas. The exit did not lead to much. There was a closed restaurant across the street, and nearby there were 2 smaller homes or apartments. Other than that, it was quiet. The kind of quiet that feels normal from a distance but becomes uncomfortable once you actually stop there. The gas station itself was closed inside. The interior lights were off, and there was no cashier, no other customers, no movement behind the glass. But the outside lights were on, and the pumps still worked with a credit card. That was good enough for me. I did not need snacks or a bathroom. I just needed enough gas to get back on the highway and keep going. I pulled up near one of the pumps and parked. Before I got out, I did what a lot of people do when they are alone at night. I checked my surroundings, maybe not in some tactical, dramatic way, but enough to make sure I was not stepping into something obviously sketchy. I looked around the lot. I looked toward the closed restaurant. I looked near the little homes or apartments. I looked around the gas station building. I did not see anyone. No cars parked nearby. No person standing by the doors. No one walking around the pumps. The place looked empty. In front of my car, off to the side of the gas station, there was a huge tree standing in an otherwise empty grassy field. It was big enough to notice, but at the time it did not seem important. It was just a tree beside a closed gas station at midnight. The field around it was open, so there did not seem to be anywhere for someone to hide on the ground. The tree itself did not have low branches either. The lowest branches were probably 6 or 7 feet off the ground, maybe higher. That detail only mattered later, after I realized someone had been in it. I got out of the car and started pumping gas. I stood by the nozzle, doing that normal gas station at night thing where you try to look casual while also staying aware of everything around you. The pump was working, the outside lights were bright, and the dark beyond the station seemed still. I was probably thinking about the drive ahead, how much gas I needed, how long it would take to reach my friends, maybe how badly I wanted to get back on the highway and be done with the stop. Nothing seemed immediately wrong. Then, about 30 to 60 seconds after I started filling up, I heard something hit the ground. It was not a small noise. It was not a leaf, a branch, or something blowing across the pavement. It was the sound of weight landing. A body. I knew before I fully turned that something had just dropped from somewhere. I looked toward the tree, and there he was. A man had jumped out of the tree. That sentence still feels absurd, but that is exactly what happened. A dude dropped out of the tree in that empty, grassy area beside the gas station. He had been up there the whole time, or at least he had been up there when I pulled in and looked around. I had checked my surroundings and seen no one because I had looked at ground level, around the building, around the pumps, around the street. I had not looked up into the tree. Why would I? Who expects a grown man to be hiding up in a tree at a closed gas station around midnight? As he was standing up, my body reacted before my brain had time to finish processing what I was seeing. I did not wait to find out if he was hurt. I did not ask what he was doing. I did not try to decide whether he was drunk, homeless, high, hiding, waiting, or just strange. I immediately put the nozzle back. I threw the gas cap into place without even sealing it properly. I slammed the gas door closed. Everything in me knew I had to leave right then. There are moments where your instincts do not give you a long explanation. They just say go. This was one of those moments. I had been alone at a closed gas station in the middle of the night, with the inside lights off and no one else around, and a man had just jumped out of a tree close to my car. There was no normal reason for him to be there. There was no normal reason for him to wait until I was out of my car and pumping gas before dropping down. I did not need to understand his plan to know I did not want to be part of it. I got back into my car as fast as I could. I threw it into drive and headed toward the highway. I did not take the time to tighten the gas cap properly. I did not care if I spilled a little gas or if the car yelled at me later. I just needed to be moving. The whole scene had shifted instantly from quiet and ordinary to dangerous and wrong. That man had been hidden in a place I never would have thought to check, watching or waiting while I pulled in, got out, put my card in, and started pumping. As I was making a U-turn to get back toward the highway, I looked back. The man was just walking toward the gas station. That almost made it creepier. He was not running at me. He was not yelling. He was not waving his arms. He was not acting like someone who had fallen out of a tree by accident and needed help. He was simply walking toward the station like this was all normal. That calmness made my stomach turn. If he had chased me, at least his intention would have been obvious. If he had called out, maybe I could have understood he wanted something. But he just continued walking toward the gas station, like he had done exactly what he meant to do, and my leaving was just part of the moment. I kept driving. Once I was back on the road, the fear did not disappear right away. If anything, it grew because I had time to think. My brain started replaying the scene from the beginning. I had pulled into a mostly empty gas station. I had looked around and seen no one. The tree had been in front of my car off to the side, standing in an empty field. There were no low branches. That meant he had either climbed up there earlier and waited, or he was somehow already in the tree for reasons that made no sense. Either way, he was hidden above my line of sight. He waited until I was outside the car, standing by the pump, before he dropped down. That is the part I cannot explain away. Why would a man be in a tree at a closed gas station at midnight? Why would he stay hidden while a car pulled in? Why would he jump down only after I had started pumping gas? Why not climb down before I arrived? Why not stay hidden until I left? Why appear at all? Maybe he was just a strange person doing something strange. Maybe he was intoxicated. Maybe he had been hiding from someone else. Maybe he was trying to sleep there, though that makes almost no sense given the height of the branches and the location. Maybe he meant me no harm at all. But in that moment, alone, at night, with no one around, I was not going to bet my safety on the most generous explanation. The timing is what bothers me most. If he had been up in the tree and simply wanted to get down, why choose that exact moment? I had only been pumping for maybe half a minute or a minute. It was enough time for him to know I was alone, to know I was outside the car, to know my attention was on the pump, and maybe to know I had not noticed him. Then he dropped. The sound was sudden enough to get my attention, but by the time I looked over, he was already on the ground and standing up. That means he was close enough that I could see him clearly, and close enough that if he had started toward me quickly, I would not have had much time. I think about the gas station itself too. The inside was closed, which meant there was no employee who could see me through the window or come out if something happened. The outside lights were on, but lights do not protect you by themselves. They only make things visible. The station was bright enough that someone could watch me easily, but not staffed enough for me to feel safe. That is a bad combination. It gives the illusion of safety without the reality of help. I was in a lit-up place, but functionally alone. The closed restaurant across the street did not help. The small homes or apartments nearby did not help either, because at midnight they were just dark shapes, and who knows if anyone inside would have noticed or cared if something happened fast. The highway was close enough to escape to, but not close enough that anyone on it could see what was happening at the pump. I was in that strange in-between space travelers know well, not isolated in the middle of nowhere, but not really protected by civilization either. Afterward, I kept thinking about how I had checked my surroundings and still missed him. That is what really gets under your skin. I did the thing people tell you to do. I looked around. I tried to be aware. I did not walk blindly into the situation. But I did not look up. Most people do not look up into a tree at a gas station unless they have a reason. That made me realize how limited checking your surroundings can be. You can scan the lot, the doors, the windows, the pumps, the shadows, and still not see the person above you. The tree, being so tall without low branches, made it worse. He had to make an effort to get up there. It was not like sitting on a low limb with your feet dangling. If the branches started 6 or 7 feet up, then he had to climb. That means he either wanted to be hidden badly enough to climb into that tree, or he was strange enough to be in that position, for reasons no normal person would understand. Neither possibility is comforting. I also wonder if he had been waiting for someone to stop. Maybe not me specifically, but anyone. Maybe he was watching the pumps from above, hidden by the branches, waiting for a lone driver. That thought is the one I do not like. Because if that was the case, then my low gas tank and my decision not to push 40 more miles put me exactly where he wanted someone to be. A closed station. A lone driver. Midnight, a person distracted by the pump. A hidden man dropping down close by. Even if nothing happened, the setup was bad enough that my instincts were right to scream at me to leave. What saved me, if there was anything to be saved from, was that I did not hesitate. I did not stand there trying to be polite. I did not ask if he was okay. I did not convince myself I was overreacting. That is something people, especially when they are alone, sometimes struggle with. They do not want to seem rude. They do not want to assume the worst. They think maybe they should help. They worry that leaving quickly will look dramatic or silly. But at midnight, alone at a closed gas station, when a man jumps out of a tree near your car, politeness should not even enter the conversation. You leave. I am glad I did, because the more I think about it, the more I realize how vulnerable that moment was. My car was stopped. The gas nozzle was in. My attention was divided. The gas cap was off. I was outside the locked space of the vehicle. If the man had approached quickly, I would have had only seconds to react. If he had been with someone else hidden nearby, I might not have seen them until it was too late. If my car had not started, or if I had fumbled with the pump longer, things could have gone differently. All of those possibilities came to me after I was already driving away, and each one made me feel colder. The strangest part is that he did not appear panicked or surprised when I left. From what I saw while making the U-turn, he simply kept walking toward the gas station. That image has stayed with me because it gives no answer. Was he going to the building? Was he going to the pump where I had been? Was he trying to ask for help and I left too fast? Was he annoyed that I left? Was he pretending to be casual? Was there a car hidden somewhere? Was someone else around? I have no idea. He was just a man who had been in a tree and then walked toward the station after I fled. There is something deeply uncomfortable about leaving a situation without knowing whether you escaped danger or just witnessed something bizarre. Your brain wants a category. It wants to label the event. Attempted robbery, drunk guy, homeless man, mental health crisis, prank, coincidence, but this did not neatly fit any category. It was just wrong. And because it was wrong, my mind kept returning to it long after the drive continued. For the rest of that night, every gas station, every exit, and every dark patch of road felt different. I was more awake than I had been before, but not in a good way. I was alert in that shaky, adrenaline-filled way where every shadow seems possible. I probably checked my mirrors more than usual. I probably kept thinking I would see someone behind me, or that the man would somehow appear again at another stop. That is irrational, but fear does not always care about distance. Once something has shown you that the night can hide people in places you do not expect, you start looking everywhere. I made it to my friends, but the memory came with me. It was not the kind of story that ends with a punchline. It was the kind that makes people say, "Yeah, you did the right thing." Because there is no good reason to stay and find out more. Not in that situation. Not alone. Not at midnight. Not at a closed gas station. Over time, I have tried to imagine normal explanations. Maybe the guy had climbed the tree earlier to sleep, though I still cannot understand why anyone would pick that tree. Maybe he was hiding from someone. Maybe he had mental health issues and did not realize how terrifying it looked to drop out of a tree near a lone driver. Maybe he was high and had no plan. Maybe he really did not care about me at all. Those explanations are possible, but they do not change what it felt like. Intentions are invisible. All I had were actions, timing, location, and instinct, and every one of those told me to get out. The whole thing lasted maybe a minute from the time I heard him hit the ground to the moment I was pulling away, but it stretched out in my memory. I can still picture the pump, the dark station windows, the bright canopy lights, the empty field, the huge tree, the sound of something landing, and the man rising from the ground. I can still feel that sudden jolt of fear when my brain understood that he had been above me, hidden, while I thought I was alone. That is the part that still makes my skin crawl. He did not come from behind the building. He did not walk up from the road. He came from above, from a place I had never thought to check. And that changed how I see late-night stops. Now, an empty gas station does not feel empty just because I do not see anyone. A bright light does not mean safety. A closed building with working pumps is not a normal stop to me anymore. It is a place where someone can be hidden just outside the shape of what you expect. It taught me that sometimes the danger is not where your eyes naturally go. Sometimes it is in the tree, above the field, waiting for the moment you are distracted. I do not know what that man wanted. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But I know that when I heard him hit the ground and saw him standing up after jumping out of that tree, every part of me understood that I needed to leave. I left so fast I did not even seal the gas cap properly. I just threw it in place, shut the door, got in the car, and headed for the highway. And when I looked back during that U-turn and saw him calmly walking toward the gas station, I knew I had made the right decision. Sometimes that is all you get in a scary situation. No explanation, no confirmation, no clear villain, just a wrong moment, a stranger where he should not be, and the instinct to leave before the story turns into something worse. The stories may be over, but some nights do not end when the video does. The people you heard tonight were not looking for fear. They were living normal lives until one moment changed the way they saw the world around them. Tell me in the comments which story stayed with you the longest. Subscribe to Nockmeyer Witness for more true accounts from people who saw something they wish they could forget. Good night. And if you wake up suddenly, do not assume it was just a dream.